Hi there, welcome to Relevation Talks. Today it's my pleasure to welcome David Desser, founding partner at CRESCO Law, one of the most successful independent law firm. David, welcome to the dance floor.
Hi, nice to meet you, Idris.
And maybe as a first question, I think really CRESCO is one of the most successful independent law firm when it comes to everything related to deal structuring, closing VC funds, closing fundraising rounds, everything related to finance, really, for both startups and on the investor side. So if you look behind your shoulder in all this journey accomplished so far, what would be the 3 milestones that really led to become a reference like today? What would be the 3 main, I would say, the 3 milestones, the 3 big steps that you have taken to reach the position you have today?
Well, I think the first one is that we started the firm 8 years ago, so I'm not the only person who founded the firm, but we always loved working with entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs we do not only view as founders of startups, but people who set up a first-time fund or later funds. I mean, they're also entrepreneurs, and in big corporates, you also have entrepreneurs, and we get a kick out of working with people who take initiatives. And the whole concept behind the firm was we want to work with entrepreneurs, being investors, founders of startups, and other people who take initiatives. And we put a sector focus on top. So we always call ourselves a sector focused law firm, meaning that we like to work for players in the technology sector, technology and technology enabled. And at the time, 8 years ago, that was quite a unique positioning. So maybe that's the first factor, is like being passionate about entrepreneurship and working with entrepreneurs. The second one, doing that with a specific sector focus, because you cannot be everything for everybody. And then the third aspect, which I think is very important one, is that our clients, who consist of many entrepreneurs, really encouraged us and pushed us to do this, because they felt that having a firm exclusively dedicated to entrepreneurship within the technology sector was something that that they would like to work with.
That was missing. That was helpful. Yeah. All right. And if you can give me maybe some numbers, so can you share, what is the track record or the credentials of CRESCO Law so far? Maybe how many deals you have supported, or representing what amount of capital, or any sort of KPI?
Oh, I mean, that is difficult. I mean, on an annual basis, it's dozens of deals. But what you really do is you work with entrepreneurs throughout the life cycle of their business, ideally before they start the business, then help it grow through fundraising and operational activities. And most often it leads to an M&A exit.
Yeah.
And then they start again. And so a lot of entrepreneurs become repeat entrepreneurs, and then they keep on working with you. But I mean, rather than the number of deals, we would focus on the number of relationships. And so we believe that when we get a kick out of working with people, not on a one-off basis, come to us and say, help me raise money. And the question is always, I mean, what do you do? Who are you? And what are your plans for the future? And fundraising is just a part of the journey. And then you'd say that, hundreds of entrepreneurs, don't know exactly how many, could check it, of course, but, and then going from really first-time entrepreneurs to people who have already created large businesses that were ultimately sold to big corporates. And in terms of numbers, I mean, in VC financing, I don't know, VC and M&A in aggregate value, over billion. I mean, but that is over an extended period of time, of course.
Yeah. Great, thank you. So we touched upon this a bit softly already. You have seen many founders across the different years. Some of them even were repeated buyers, repeated founders, sorry. Some of them went through different rounds of financing with different stage of maturity, from seeds, Series A, B, C, and onwards. And so my question is, have you identified any sort of patterns or traits of personality that an entrepreneur needs to be successful? Can you qualify, what it takes for an entrepreneur to be successful from a personality trait perspective?
I mean, they're all special. I mean, and they need to be very eager and focus on their mission and vision and do everything to achieve it. And what motivates them. I mean, they're all special. I mean, I don't think I've ever met a founder of a business who is successful and who does not have something special. And some people, want to conquer the world. What certainly unites them is that not a single one of them has as a first focus to earn money. I mean, earning money, that of course is part of why people work, because if you don't earn money, you cannot make a living, but it's never the first motivator. I mean, the first motivator is to build a great product. I mean, I remember many years ago, there was a panel debate with Felix van der Malen of Colibra. And then they asked each person of the panel, so what is your ambition? And you could say, well, I want to be a unicorn, because that was the period of time that unicorns became famous. And he simply said, I want to be the category leader. So and then Colibra at that time was very small still, at its first seed financing round, and in the meantime, by now, worth 5 billion, and have attracted money from the most sophisticated investors in the world. But his motivation was, I want to dominate my category and be the leader. And I think good entrepreneurs have this singular focus on achieving something, and it may be different for every one of them.
Of course. But you underlined this idea of having enough drive, having enough motivation, having a sense of purpose, which is not related to financial gains, or not directly linked or contained only into generating cash. So it's already something. And now I'm also curious to understand the other side of the table, the VC side. So I saw a report recently stating that 75% of the VCs in Europe, so there are more than 1,200 VCs, 75% of the VCs generate returns that are below 10% IRR. It's a way to say that VC don't perform. Only 25% generate more than 10% returns, and only 15% generate returns above 20%. So it's really like mind-blowing statistics, I think. So my question is, among all the VCs you have seen, have you identified any personality traits or anything else than personality traits, but that a VC needs to be successful, to be on the top quarter of the 100%?
I mean, it's, of course, I mean, there's many VCs, they're active in different sectors, so it's not so easy to give a general picture, but I certainly think that for those VCs who have a specific sector focus, the fact of having worked as an executive or founder in such a business themselves, it makes a difference. Now you take a very known entrepreneur, client of ours, Jurgen Engels, who founded Clear to Pay and then sold it, and then you set up your venture fund SmartFin, which has partly a fintech focus. Well, if you have worked for 20 years in fintech and have actually ran a business and built it, I think that makes
you know what you speak about.
a big difference. And I think secondly, but you have tides, you have periods of time when the market is founder friendly, and you have times when it is VC friendly. And now we've gone through a long period where the market is very founder friendly, with a lot of capital looking to be allocated.
Yeah.
And now, stock market is going down, valuations are going down. And so now it seems that the market tide is turning. But I think we work for both sides. We work for entrepreneurs, we work for investors, and the most successful partnerships, because that's what it is. So you make the investment, but that's just the start of the relationship. And to have a collaborative mindset from not only from the investor side, but also from the founder side, and make sure that deals are structured equitable and fair for each party. And that makes that's important, to make sure that they work together and try to build and grow businesses going forward.
Yeah, and the collaboration depends on many different aspects, I guess, and it all starts with the term sheet negotiation. So we will discuss definitely about this in a second. But first, the last component of this equation, founders, VCs, is the LPs, of course, because without LPs, no VCs. So my question is regarding the LPs. Don't you think that they are in a very that they are generally very conservative, meaning that they look at what is common practice, what is market standard, and they don't want to. They are not interested or reluctant to have any innovation in the collaboration with VCs, because either they don't understand it, or they're afraid because it's risky, or just because it's different. And so I think from an outsider perspective that it actually brings a lot of inefficiencies in the industry, just because it's market standard, but it could be optimized, but we don't want to optimize it because it's market standard. And so, for instance, it generates a fund mechanism where VCs invoice management fees as a center, as a profit center, instead of being incentivized to invest well, etc., etc. They could just invoice the management fees, like in private equity.
No,
And last point regarding this, it's also the fact that the industry standard is really being close-ended funds, 10 years funds, while probably the best type of capital for entrepreneurs is open-ended funds, where they don't have this short time pressure to execute. And so there is a time alignment with the VCs. So big question, but is there room for improvement here?
I mean, I think there's a variety of models being considered, and I mean, we do set up a lot of funds, and I'm not negative about the relationships between GPs and LPs. I think they strike a balance. So you have the 220 model, 2% management fee, 20% carried interest.
Yeah.
And well, without going into the details, but LPs are certainly focused on making sure that VCs, that it's not a business where you can just live off the management fee and be happy with that, and not focus on actually creating value. So I think that is something that is adequately managed. Now, to get to your point on open versus closed-ended.
Just on the management fees before, if I may, for instance, a mechanism could be that we do during the first 5 years 2% on the committed capital, and after the first investment 5 years, when you're in the disinvestment phase, it's the invested capital. And
But that's how it typically would be structured, and also with a cap to say over the lifetime of the fund, the total management fee cannot be more than X% of the capital of the fund. To get to your point on closed versus open-ended, it sounds very nice, an open-ended fund, and we've looked at it at various angles already, how to structure those type of funds, but it's very difficult to do so. And that is because with a closed-end fund, you make an investment for a limited period of time. I mean, 10 years, a minimum, to be extended with 2, 3, 4, 5 years maximum, which already is quite a long time, 15 years. But to really have an open-ended model, you would really need to find a mechanism to provide liquidity for your LPs. And that is something that in the absence of a public market is very difficult to structure. So I think there's certainly interest, and then you look more to, you know, very wealthy family offices, and there are certain investors that have their own, let's call it internal VC funds, and that have no time limitation on making and holding investments. Very recently, I think Sequoia, I mean, which is, you know, one of the most known investors, they recently moved to such a model where instead of investing in specific funds, they created an open structure where investors invest in Sequoia as a whole, and where Sequoia then decides to allocate funding to different sub funds. So to be seen, I mean, how it evolves.
Yeah, and I'm also very interested about another type of capital, which is not a dilutive capital, so they don't purchase shares in exchange, but it's the revenue-based financing, a sort of loan where you get like you give X amount of capital, and then along the next 4 years you get X% of the turnover. So interesting model as well, I think. Now let's maybe discuss the term sheets. So let's first take the entrepreneur standpoint. So could you maybe walk us through what really do matter in a term sheet? Because often in all the different conditions, it's not always easy to understand what really do matter. Where is the red line that you cannot cross to protect your own interest? Otherwise, you will be you might be in big problems.
Look, I think I think the interest of investors and entrepreneurs in getting a good term sheet done, that they are aligned.
Yes.
I don't view that there is an opposition between the two. Mm-hmm. And our point of view is that when drafting a term sheet, it should be really detailed. And touch upon all aspects, of course. I mean, you have valuation, what's the amount to be invested, what are the preferences, what is the anti-dilution protection mechanism that applies, how will the governance look like, is funding provided in different stages, what are the good lever, bad lever arrangements, what are the exit scenarios, what are the veto rights that you would give to an investor. So you get to very detailed documents and it's in the interest of both the entrepreneurs and the investors that such term sheet is as detailed as possible, because there's nothing easier than to really have a 2-page term sheet saying, you're fantastic and this is the valuation and this is the amount that will be invested, and everything else we'll negotiate at the later stage. So I think our job in general is to tell either the entrepreneurs or the investor, depending for whom we work. We always think that there should be a fair balance between the two sides. And if you as an investor, use or abuse your position to push the entrepreneur against the wall by demanding certain unreasonable things, then the likelihood that the day that there is trouble in the business, that you will not have a friend at the side of the founders, entrepreneurs is pretty real. Vice versa, we also tell to founders that certain aspects are normal from the VC point of view. So for example, if you are 3 founders and after the VC round you own 80%, well, that the investor wants to know that you're committed to the business and will not leave the business soon afterwards. That's normal. So that's why you need good leaver, bad leaver arrangements, and to explain that, say, listen, you know, this is standard in any type of transaction, and there really is standard, I would say.
Yeah, clear. Then maybe a question more on another kind of capital, which is more CVC, so corporate investing in direct. Could you clarify why you think it's a great innovation strategy to invest directly in startups? Because you have many different innovation strategies. Of course, it depends on what is the outcome that you prefer. But what are I would say, the benefits of investing in direct? And also maybe what are the pitfalls or the negative points? And I'm asking this question also from a founder's perspective, because there might be a lot of founders listening to this conversation. And so when they assess an opportunity to get a corporate on board, what are the attention points that they should have? You know, what are the benefits? What are the risks?
Well, I mean, now you're touching on a topic that is dear to us, because I mean, everything which is corporate venturing, corporate partnering related, that is core expertise of what we do. And we wrote a book on the topic on how you can grow your business by collaborating with others. And very often the others are corporates. And we always say that the focus just on making a venture capital investment, I mean, by a corporate, that is only a small part of what corporate venturing consists of. I mean, there's many ways in which you can collaborate with the corporate, and by entering into a reseller relationship, a joint venture, a joint development arrangement. These are all ways to grow your business and also have the corporate fund the business. And I mean, the way we see corporates approaching it very often is that they view a minority investment as something that should give them control over the business, which for founders is not easy, of course. And if you already have financial investors, it's not something that they would accept. So financial investors very often are quite hesitant or negative for a corporate to make an investment. That being said, we think there's a lot of value, and because that corporate has many qualities that are interesting for a startup. I mean, you can be a launch client, and they can act as a reseller, they're a source of funding, and at the end, they might buy you. So we always, I mean, in general, we say to founders and their businesses, I mean, there's 3 things to focus on. One, when considering a relationship with a corporate, and the first one is, what is my freedom to operate my business after the corporate enters into a relationship with me, whether it's an investment or a different type of relationship. 2, what is my freedom to raise funding or enter into any other, you know, strategic collaboration. What's my freedom after the investment? And 3rd, can I make sure that if the company gets sold one day, that I can do that at optimal conditions? And those 3 basic criteria, we always tell people and ourselves, you know, when advising, we always take those into account to make sure that that it's structured in a mutually beneficial way.
Yeah, excellent, crystal clear. Now, another topic I'd like to bring to the conversation is the idea of collective intelligence. So let me explain. I'm a big believer that in Europe, especially, there are plenty of failure stories. I mean, there are plenty of failure stories, I guess, everywhere. But I think in Europe, people are going through bankruptcy or doing big mistakes, going through awful experience, etc., etc. But they don't speak about it. they don't share, what was their return on experience. And so I think it's a huge potential of lessons learned that we cannot capitalize on, that we cannot use, and that we cannot leverage to make smarter decisions, because it's just everyone who must go through these mistakes instead of reading or hearing about it. Or so there is no such a common shared knowledge library available or anything like this. So my question to you is, you have seen many kind of collaborations between VCs and LPs, as well a lot of collaborations between VCs and founders. So could you maybe share a couple of anecdotes, anonymously, of course, of stories that went bad, so stories that went sour, just to maybe inspire the audience, or just to raise concerns?
I cannot go into, for confidentiality purposes, I cannot go into details about specific, but I would say in general that in venturing and venture capital, what makes it different from, for example, an M&A transaction is that it's a living thing. People, they get together, businesses get together, they do something together, they sign a contract, but the contract has to live and be implemented. And I think in general, when relationships are not fair and balanced, and a corporate uses its weight or might to impose something, that is not positive, and vice versa. And that is also, I like your concept of collective intelligence, and the fact that people, have to learn from what works well and what does not work well. And that's, for example, one of the reasons why we wrote our book. To really explain to people and give our vision on, this is how we believe that you should do these things. Lessons learned, and making sure that you don't have to go through that cycle time and time again and start from scratch to achieve something. Mutually beneficial.
Yeah, the fact that it's a living relationship, it's indeed crucial to understand. It doesn't stop after that you sign the term sheets or the new shareholder agreement, or even when you have the money on the bank account. It just starts then, actually. So I'm also curious about maybe a more personal or even philosophical question, which I'm struggling a lot with currently, to be transparent, is the idea of the cost of success. What is the cost of success for an entrepreneur? How much should you be ready to sacrifice your private life fundamentals for the sake of the success of the business? Because if at some point you lose yourself because you put on hold too much what really matters in your private life, if you become someone else, if you lose your internal peace, isn't it too expensive? But if you're not ready to do this sacrifice, maybe you're just not set to be entrepreneur. So what would be your feedback or your views on this dilemma?
Well, I think, that's valid for everybody setting up a business, whether you're a tech entrepreneur or otherwise. It's also something that, when we set up CRESCO and you have to grow it and run it, it is all consuming. So I don't have an easy answer to that question. I think that indeed, your work-life balance, that's certainly when you start and grow the business, that it's very difficult to, maybe 9 to 5 is the wrong expression, but it never stops. And that is what you see with all entrepreneurs. That being said, I think to let go at a certain point in time requires you to have a team that can do many things or take over concerns that you are dealing with as an entrepreneur all by yourself. And so to build a strong team you can rely on, and to really delegate and trust that they will do well, that can help you to get to a decent work-life balance. But certainly in the startup phase, yeah, I think it's very difficult not to, you know, go all out and have no balance. I'm afraid. Certainly also, I mean, there's always someone else, maybe not necessarily in Belgium, but anywhere in the world. You know, if you set up a startup and you grow it, someone else who has the same idea or a better idea and tries to outcompete you. So you have to keep your eyes open and just not focus only on yourself, but there's always someone else who is willing to put in the hours and work even harder than you. So it's not, yeah, it's a bit of a devil's bargain. I mean, I think it is very nice and interesting to set up something and grow it, but it's all consuming in general, I would say.
Yeah, the cost is expensive. We don't know how expensive, but I guess it's the only, I mean, for all the entrepreneurs, and I'm an entrepreneur, of course, it's probably the only thing that really is life-giving, you know, giving you energy, etc., etc.
But it's a very important attention point. I mean, it's something that because at the end of the day, I mean, what is important is I mean, of course, what you create, but much more important is your personal life, your loved ones, and live your life with them as well. Huh? So I've seen, I think, too many times in my life, people who, I mean, focus only on their job and completely neglect the personal, and they regret it afterwards. I mean, you might be able to build something which is very successful professionally, but if then your personal life, well, is empty, well, then what, you know? So, but it's difficult. It's there's no easy answer to your question, I'm afraid.
It was meant to be. It's a hard question, so an easy answer would not satisfy me anyway. So thank you very much. And you'll have the pleasure to listen to David. He will moderate actually 2 panels during Relevation 2022. So go on relevation.org, Relevation referring to real estate elevation, of course. Grab your ticket, and we see you on 29th and 30th of June 2020. Thank you, David.
Okay, thank you, Idris. Bye.
Bye.